Mental illness is a problem that affects so many people, yet so few talk about it.
About 1 in 5 adults will experience some type of mental health issue, but only about 44% of those people actually receive the treatment they need.
And that's why tonight we're going to spend extra time sharing one man's story. He's a local high school football star and Super Bowl champion who kept his struggle with mental illness a secret until now.
He's sharing his story with 2 on Your Side's Melissa Holmes with hopes of ending the stigma of mental illness and encouraging others like him to get the help they need.
When it comes to Sweet Home High School football, Keith O'Neill is Panther pride. His name is permanently enshrined in the Athletics Hall of Fame.
I had a lot of great memories at Sweet Home, some of the best of my life.
The son of former NFL linebacker Ed O'Neill, football was always in his blood.
I think naturally, I wanted to be like my father.
But childhood wasn't perfect, dealing with sleeplessness and anxiety as young as 8 years old.
I would toss and I would turn. I would, stay up really late at night, and that's scary for a child.
After he graduated from Sweet Home, he went on to Northern Arizona University. He found success on the field. He found his future wife, Jill. He also found alcohol.
I think I drank to cope more than to be social in college.
Keith went undrafted, but managed to earn a spot at rookie minicamp with the Dallas Cowboys. He studied the playbook, he worked harder than he ever worked before, and it paid off with a roster spot. But Keith wasn't in a condition to celebrate.
This is when a lot of my symptoms from childhood came back. Sleepless nights, anxiety, pressure. I went 5 nights during training camp my rookie year without sleeping.
What should have been a dream felt like a nightmare.
No, it was very bittersweet. I was making a great amount of money coming out of college. I was playing for America's team. I was living my childhood dream, and part of me, most of me, hated every minute of it.
At the end of his first season in the NFL, he went to Coach Bill Parcells with a stunning decision.
And I said, "Coach, I quit." And I handed him my playbook, and he actually looked at me and said, "What, are you crazy?" And I looked at him right in the eye and I said, "Yeah." Keith
came clean to Parcells about his sleeplessness and anxiety, but Parcells wouldn't let him quit.
He gave me a pep talk, and I'll never forget the gist of it, and it was beat the demon. Everyone has a demon in their head, but you have to beat yours.
He tried to do that by simply white-knuckling it and taking some sleeping pills.
I became somewhat addicted to Ambien, and that kind of got me through a little bit. But I really didn't know how to approach mental illness.
Keith was cut at the end of that season and immediately picked up by the Colts, but his problems followed him to Indianapolis.
Here I was, a 25-year-old linebacker in the NFL, talking about not being able to play in a game because I couldn't sleep. And it was very humbling, I guess, humiliating. I didn't feel like a man, but I knew I needed help.
Something deep down was telling him this was more than pro football jitters. He had a heart-to-heart with Coach Tony Dungy. He saw a counselor, and he took pills for anxiety. His body over the next 2 years played the best football of his life. His mind, however, was in pain without a true diagnosis. In 2007, he won a Super Bowl with the Colts, and he decided that would be the last game of his career.
The fire went out, and I just knew it was over for me.
So where did you go from there?
The story's just beginning.
With the stressors of the NFL far behind them, they moved back to Buffalo. Keith started selling medical devices, Jill was a nurse, and they tried to start a family.
Jill got pregnant. We were ecstatic. I was beyond happy, and she miscarried early in the pregnancy, and that was my trigger.
What should have been a time of great sorrow was the exact opposite for Keith.
I went into a manic episode, which means I went really high. I was euphoric, working 18 hours a day, spending money. I spent $30,000 in a week. I was on top of the world. I was on cloud 9.
Days after a miscarriage, I wasn't feeling like that, We were literally, it was like we were in 2 different places.
But suddenly he came crashing down from that strange high.
It switched to paranoia, to delusional thinking. I started thinking that my phones were tapped. It got even more extreme, and you know, I started to think that I was being called on by God.
That's when Keith went to a doctor again, and he finally got some answers.
And that's when I was diagnosed with bipolar 1 disorder and put on meds. And the meds literally knocked the mania right out of me.
But he wasn't out of the darkness. He sunk into a deep depression for months. And just weeks after the birth of their first son, Keith O'Neill wanted it all to end.
I wasn't thinking about my son or my wife or my family or my nephews and nieces, and I was thinking about the pain that I was living in. I overdosed. I counted out 50 Ambiens, and I just took them.
That was 5 years ago, and he's kept his pain a secret until now.
And I just take a moment very often and thank God for another chance in life. Who got you this?
A chance to be a good husband and father, a chance to connect with others, a chance to help end the stigma of mental illness.
And the secrecy that I lived and the shame was just as bad as the illness itself.
That was our initial reaction, was to hide it and not tell anyone, because we knew what people would think, because that's just kind of the culture that is created about it.
And that's what brings Keith back to Sweet Home today. Not to relive his high school days on the field, but to share his story and inspire others. He started a foundation called Fourth and Forever to raise awareness and funds for mental illness. Keith's book, Under My Helmet, has just been released, sharing his story, his struggle, and his survival.
I kept a lot away from people. I hid a lot, and being under my helmet, not just my brain, so to speak, in the illness, but also, like I said, like the secrecy of it all.
But he refuses to hide under his helmet any longer.
I want to do something about this. I want it to be okay to talk about bipolar disorder the same way it is to talk about cancer or diabetes. And it should. It's an illness. It's just an illness of the brain, you know, and a lot of people suffer silently with it.
Keith's symptoms appeared in childhood, way before he started playing football. But he tells me he thinks every day about concussions and CTE and the physical effects of the game. And he plans to see a neurologist to find out if head trauma through football in high school and college and the NFL may have exacerbated the illness. But that is not the focus of this book. It's about mental illness, which affects 1 in 5 people. Melissa Holmes, Channel 2 News.
Thank you, Melissa, and we hope you'll join us for a Facebook Live. Immediately after this newscast, we have a team of experts here to answer your questions about mental illness.
And you can also log on to WGRZ.com to find a list of mental health resources as well as extended interviews with Keith O'Neill. You know, it's so encouraging to see him coming forward like this. Keith and others. Also think of Thurman and Patty Thomas and their daughter Annika, who's been very outspoken about this issue as well, raising awareness.
It's important to demystify it because mental illness is tough. It's difficult sometimes just to get diagnosed and then to get on the correct meds, and it's a difficult process for the counseling and medical side of it for patients. So really looking forward to that Facebook Live to hear some advocates talk about how people can get help. That's what it's all about.
Be on very shortly, right after the newscast.